Trump's chief strategist, Steve Bannon, said this about the press. He said the media should be embarrassed and humiliated. He's talking about coverage of the campaign here, and thus should, quote, keep its mouth shut and just listen for a while. He added, and this is probably the key quote, the media here is the opposition party. The Democrats are actually the opposition party, but it's not just the president's senior advisor framing the relationship this way. It's also the president himself.
I think the media is the opposition party in many ways, and I think that, and I'm not talking about all media. I know people like yourself, but I know people in the media that I have tremendous respect for. I respect them as much as anybody. So I'm not talking about everybody, but a big portion of the media, the dishonesty, the total deceit and deception makes them certainly partially the opposition party, absolutely.
Meanwhile, Trump started to keep many promises this week, signing executive orders that will take time to implement. Reporters are going to have to keep following up to see what actually happens. While he was doing all of this, Trump managed to say dozens of false and misleading things during his first week in office. All politicians spin, but Trump makes them look like amateurs. So why did he complain about the Times today and also yesterday? Maybe it was this. Here on the front page, a story all about his fabrications, saying there was a torrent of bogus claims that he made during his first days in office. Joining me now to talk about all of this, Brooke Gladstone, the co-host of WNYC's On the Media, Stephen Adler, the editor-in-chief of Reuters, and the new editor-in-chief of the Huffington Post, Lydia Polgreen. Lydia, congratulations on your new role, first of all. Let me ask you first about this alleged war. If Trump says he's at war with the media, if he and his aides are calling us the opposition party, does that mean we automatically are at war with him?
Absolutely not, and we are not the opposition party. It would be very convenient for Trump to have the media as the opposition, but the media aren't the ones who are flocking to the airports to protest the Muslim ban. The media aren't the ones who filled the streets the day after the election. This is ordinary Americans getting out there and saying what they believe. They're being joined by members of the actual opposition party, which is the Democratic Party. And I think our job in all of this is to separate fact from fiction, to use the very best tools in our arsenal to tell the stories that matter and tell them with integrity and with honesty, and basically ignore this effort to frame us as the enemy.
Ignore it. We've heard that from a lot of journalists this week, that Bannon and Trump are just trying to bait us, that we cannot take the bait. But Stephen Adler, here's my question. If one side says they're at war with you, and the other side says, no, we're not at war, doesn't that side lose?
No, absolutely not. I mean, let's put this in context. Reuters, as you know, is a global organization. We're on the ground in 115 countries. I can think of very few countries where the government says nice things about the press, and there's a reason for that. I mean, the reason for that is our job, if we're at our best, is to try to get factual information to people so they can make smarter decisions about what to do for their lives and their loved ones. And inherently, the government is trying to spin the story in their favor. So you just have a different interest. It doesn't make you the opposition. It means your interest is different. So what do? You remember who your reader is, your customer is, and you go out there and try to give them what they need, and you use whatever resources you can to get the information, and you don't rely on handouts, and you don't worry so much about access. You just do good journalism, but also, again, remember who the end user is. It's not us. We're not talking to each other. We're talking to people out there who actually need to know what's going on.
Now, Brooke, you're not an editor. You don't have to worry about a newsroom full of writers. You're a critic. You're an observer of all of this. So do you agree with the view that this is not a war, we are not at war with any administration?
Yeah, just don't engage.
Don't engage.
And the fact is, all through history, the entire media have always been against presidents. George Mason University did a study and found that in the first 7 months of Reagan's office, the first George Bush, Clinton, the second George Bush, Obama, all of the positive stories were about 30% of the total. And of course, even less for Obama on Fox.
Conservatives are screaming at the TV saying Obama was given a free ride for 8 years.
It's completely untrue, especially in the first 7 months. They're particularly tough. The biggest free press advocate in our history, probably Thomas Jefferson, said that you couldn't believe anything you read in a newspaper because when he became president, one of the earliest stories was about him and Sally Hemings, the slave, and all the children that he probably had with her. And said it enraged him. He said that even so, you needed the press and its agitation to keep the waters pure.
The famous quote, I just pulled it up, were it left for me to decide whether we should have a government without newspapers or newspapers without a government, I would not hesitate for a moment to prefer the latter. That was Jefferson later on concluding how important journalism was. But isn't this all easy to say, Lydia? It's easy to say that we should just do our jobs, that everything's normal. Do you view this as a normal time for journalism?
This is not a normal presidency, and so I think this is not a normal time for journalism. And I think we're going to be under unprecedented pressure and attack. And I think that the only way that we can respond to that is by doing exactly what Stephen said, continuing to serve the people who we are, under the Constitution, mandated to serve. The Constitution doesn't say that the press has any special right. It really comes down to the ordinary person's right to have information and to have unfettered information. And that's who we serve. That's our role in American democracy.
So maybe we need to reframe this. Maybe rather than being on defense, people saying we're the opposition party, maybe this is about saying there seems to be a war on information from this Trump White House?
I think that's absolutely right.
Is that true? A war on information?
I think there's clearly a war on information. There's a war on truth. There's a war on fact. And, you know,
Some say on reality itself.
Now,
Yes.
Stephen, do you agree? I mean, you're one of the biggest news organizations in the world, Reuters. Do you sense something different right now versus Bush and Obama and other past presidents?
Well, look, it's certainly different. Not to say that Obama was especially good on access, because he wasn't, by the way. The press had a lot of issues with that.
That's right.
But what I'd say is, you know, if it's a war on information, that's not a war we have to fight. Our job is to provide information, and frankly, taking handouts from an administration is not the best way to get information. So in my view, it's the best time to be a journalist, right? It's challenging, it's exciting, it's interesting, it's hard to be a good journalist, it's really hard to be a great journalist, and in this environment you have to be. So I'm thinking, though, you know, we cover Duterte, we cover Sisi, we cover Putin, you know, all around the world, we cover Erdogan, all around the world you face these challenges, and so there is a playbook for that. I mean, the
And we're going to discuss that later this hour. Two journalists from those places dealing with this. Brooke, let me ask you about the CNN factor here. You've been a critic of CNN before on your program on the media. Well, that's obviously good. We need the criticism. We need the feedback. I wonder right now if what we're seeing from this administration, this effort to delegitimize CNN in particular, stands out to you. Let me show you what the Milwaukee mayor, David Clark, said earlier this week. Sheriff Clark was trying to be interviewed by CNN's Jeremy Diamond. Sheriff Clark, a regular on Fox News, here's what he wrote back to Jeremy Diamond. Donald Trump has labeled CNN as fake news. When President Trump says CNN is okay again,